ambassador to Washington and is now Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. He joins us from Riyadh. Accusation that the kingdom's influence in the recent decision to cut oil production, pushing prices higher, at least in the short term, is siding with Russia. What's your response to that?
Saudi Arabia is not siding with Russia. Saudi Arabia is taking the side of trying to ensure the stability of the oil markets, which benefits consumers and producers alike. We have been doing this for decades. We try to make sure that we don't have erratic swings in prices so that we can have logic when it comes to investments, when it comes to lending, and when it comes to prices. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia believes in this strongly. The decision to reduce the quotas was taken unanimously by 22 countries, and the markets have responded very positively to this. The price of oil has actually come down since last week, not gone up.
Yeah, and that is the irony, of course. So Washington says the economic fundamentals didn't justify a cut of that size at this point. And so the only beneficiary in their eyes, they say, is Vladimir Putin. The irony, of course, as I say, is that prices haven't actually moved any higher. As OPEC's largest producer, the kingdom must have considered the fallout when making the decision, which was a decision against the better judgment, reportedly, of other members who pushed back on it. How concerned are you by these threats by President Biden of consequences for the kingdom's actions?
Well, if you allow me, Becky, the other point I would like to make is that Saudi Arabia has supported the UN resolution with regards to the, after the crisis began between Russia and Ukraine. Saudi Arabia opposes the acquisition of territory by force. Saudi Arabia has had open lines of communications with both Ukraine and Russia, and we have been able to use those open lines of communications to work out an agreement on the exchange of prisoners of war. This would not have happened had we been viewed as taking sides between one side and the other. Saudi Arabia provides humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and continues to do so, and we're looking for ways to try to bring the two sides to the negotiating table to find a resolution, a negotiated resolution out of this issue. We don't believe that escalation is beneficial to Europe or beneficial to the world, frankly.
Meanwhile, the United States has bigger problems, according to the Middle East Eye staff in Washington in an article dated October 18, 2022. Hundreds of retired U.S. military officers, including former generals and admirals, have used their military backgrounds to ink lucrative deals working for foreign countries, mostly among the Gulf monarchies like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, according to two long-term investigations by the Washington Post. Investigations from the Washington Post, working alongside the Project on Government Oversight, found that 280 military retirees sought authorization to work for the United Arab Emirates, either as military contractors or consultants. The highest-ranking officer in the report was retired General Jim Mattis, who served as former President Trump's Secretary of Defense. Mattis served as a military advisor to the United Arab Emirates in 2015 and returned to serve as defense chief in 2017. Robert Trier, co-president of Cohen Group, a Washington-based consulting firm where Mattis works as a senior consultant, told the Washington Post that the former defense secretary advised the Emiratis on the operational, tactical, informational, and ethical aspects of military operations, but did not request or accept payment from the United Arab government other than reimbursement for travel expenses. The newspaper spent 2 years suing the federal government under the Freedom of Information Act for the records and obtained 4,000 documents under FOIA. The documents also revealed that 15 former generals and admirals have worked directly with Saudi Arabia's defense ministry, headed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who launched the Saudi-led coalition war in Yemen. One of those generals is retired Marine General James I. Jones, who served as former President Barack Obama's national security advisor and started working with Riyadh in 2017. For the project, Jones enlisted the help of about a dozen former senior Pentagon officials, including William Cohen, who served as the Secretary of Defense in the Clinton administration, according to the newspaper. The investigation also revealed that several officers had continued to work with the kingdom after the murder of Washington Post and Middle East eye columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who was killed by Saudi agents in the country's consulate in Istanbul in 2018. And that's only because the Saudis and Emiratis pay well. And what the article doesn't illuminate and doesn't need to because of the overwhelming attention that it got from it and then disappeared, of course, is the largest humanitarian crisis in the world right now, which is Yemen. Need I remind you about the participation of some of their Saudi government officials in the year 2000 in aiding and abetting two known Al Qaeda operatives inside the United States, who incidentally were part of a hijacking team on September 11, 2001. Khalid al-Minar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were financially and logistically assisted by Saudi government officials, including Fahad al-Tamari, a known imam at the King Fahd Mosque in Culver City, Los Angeles, Omar al-Bayoumi, who is a 30-year employee of the Saudi government firm, the Saudi Arabian Air Presidency. And Muassad al-Jarrah, who works in Washington, D.C. at the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Muassad al-Jarrah was considered the lead agent in conducting and recruiting militants, according to the FBI files under Operation Anqul. Saudi Arabia is also the instigator and main propagator of Wahhabi Islam and the groups that followed it under their religious sect, which helped to form the country, which gave us groups like Al Qaeda, Abu Sayyaf, Boko Haram, and the Islamic State and the Levant. For years, this country had been sympathetic to Islamic militants throughout the 80s and 90s. On one hand, you have a government that is a large family, over 5,000 in the kingdom. And then you have Saudi sympathizers to these Wahhabi-led groups and who are sympathetic to the Wahhabi ideology, who are fighting against the Western-backed Saudi government. And so when you have former U.S. officials working on behalf of a country that has been a detriment to hegemony in the region, as well as guilty, partly guilty, of being involved in terrorist attacks. And you must ask, if it's about money, then these people sold their souls long ago. But if it's not, then what other reason is there to work alongside a country that has attacked U.S. interests abroad and, of course, inside the country itself? Will our own government officials and military officials side with an enemy if it means just getting paid? And if that's shocking to you, it shouldn't, because that's exactly the reason why you should not be voting Democrat or Republican, because both of those parties basically do the same thing.